At 14:15 on the afternoon of March 6, 1945, Corporal Clarence Smoyer pressed his eye against the gun sight of an M26 Pershing tank on the corner of Gerionstrasse and Christophstrasse in Cologne, Germany. He was 21 years old and his hands were shaking. Through the telescopic sight he could see the twin spires of Cologne Cathedral rising against a grey sky, miraculously intact amid a city reduced to rubble. Closer, perhaps 300 yards ahead, smoke drifted from the wreckage of an American Sherman tank. Inside that Sherman, 3 men Smoyer had known for months were burning. The Panther that killed them was still out there, somewhere. Smoyer's tank commander, Sergeant Robert Early, stood in the turret hatch scanning the ruins. The loader, Homer Davis, had a 90mm armor-piercing round ready. The driver, William McVeigh, kept the engine idling, ready to move. In Smoyer's breast pocket was a photograph of his parents back in Laheyton, Pennsylvania. He had not written to them in 3 weeks. There had been no time. What Smoyer did not know, as he searched the rubble for the Panther's silhouette, was that 50 yards behind him, a U.S. Army Signal Corps cameraman named Jim Bates was filming everything. The next 3 minutes would become the most famous tank duel of World War II, and the only one captured on motion picture film from beginning to end. The men of the 3rd Armored Division had been promised a tank that could kill Panthers. For 3 years, they had waited. In February 1945, at a staging area near Stolberg, Germany, Colonel Leander Duckworth addressed the tankers of Task Force X. Behind him sat something none of them had ever seen, an M26 Pershing heavy tank. Its 90mm gun was longer than anything in the American arsenal. Its armor was thicker than any Sherman. "Gentlemen," Duckworth said, "this is your new weapon. This tank can destroy anything the Germans have. One shot." That phrase would define the Pershing's reputation. Where Shermans needed flank shots, multiple hits, or pure luck to kill a Panther, the Pershing could do it from the front with 1 round. Sergeant Early walked around the new tank, running his hand along the 90mm barrel. "About damn time," he muttered. Corporal Smoyer climbed into the gunner's seat for the first time and looked through the sight. The optics were better than anything he had used before. The controls were smooth, precise. "If we'd had this a year ago," Smoyer told Early, "half the boys we buried would still be alive." Early nodded, but said nothing. He knew what Smoyer knew. The Pershing had arrived too late for most of the men they had lost. It would not be too late for all of them. 3 weeks later, they would prove it in Cologne. The American Tankers' War had been a war of burning Shermans. Since D-Day, the M4 Sherman had been the backbone of Allied armored forces. It was reliable, easy to produce, and available in vast numbers. But against German Panthers and Tigers, it was fatally outmatched. The Sherman's 75mm gun could not penetrate a Panther's frontal armor at any range. The Panther's 75mm KW-42, by contrast, could destroy a Sherman at over a mile. Worse, the Sherman's ammunition storage made it prone to catastrophic fires. Tankers called it the Ronson, after the cigarette lighter whose slogan was "Lights every time." By February 1945, the 3rd Armored Division had lost over 700% of its original tank strength. Not 700 tanks, 700%. The division had been destroyed and rebuilt more than 7 times over. The Army knew the Sherman was inadequate. The M26 Pershing had been in development since 1943, but production delays, logistical arguments, and bureaucratic inertia kept it from the front lines. Generals argued that the Sherman was good enough. Tankers who died inside burning Shermans might have disagreed. In January 1945, with the war clearly entering its final months, General Dwight Eisenhower demanded that the Pershing be rushed to Europe. 20 M26 tanks arrived at Antwerp in February, too late for the Bulge, too late for most of the war, but just in time for the Rhine crossings. The 3rd Armored Division received a handful of these new tanks. Task Force X, advancing toward Cologne, had 3 Pershings among its 54 vehicles. Smoyer's tank, nicknamed Eagle 7, was one of them. The Germans knew Cologne was lost. The city had been bombed over 260 times by Allied aircraft. 90% of the center was rubble. But the Wehrmacht was determined to make the Americans pay for every block. Defending the approaches to the cathedral was a mixed force of regular Wehrmacht troops, Volkssturm militia, and remnants of armored units. Among them was at least 1 Panther tank, a Panther Ausführung G, the final production model, with an 80mm sloped frontal plate that could defeat almost any Allied tank gun. Almost any. On the morning of March 6, 1945, Task Force X entered Cologne from the west. Their objective was the cathedral and the bridges beyond. Standing in their way was a city of ruins, scattered defenders, and 1 Panther that would become famous for being destroyed. Clarence Smoyer had spent 18 months preparing for this moment. Born in 1923 in Lehighton, Pennsylvania, he had enlisted in the army at 19. He had never seen a tank before basic training. By the time he reached Europe in late 1944, he had fired thousands of practice rounds and spent hundreds of hours maintaining the temperamental Sherman. His first combat experience came in November 1944, near Stolberg. His Sherman was hit by a German anti-tank gun. The round penetrated the hull, killing the driver instantly. Smoyer escaped through the turret hatch, his uniform on fire while ammunition cooked off behind him. He went back to another Sherman the next day. There was no choice. By February 1945, Smoyer had survived the destruction of 2 tanks and the deaths of 7 crewmates. He had learned the brutal calculus of armored warfare. See first, shoot first, or die. There was no second place. When the Pershing arrived, Smoyer and his crew trained obsessively. The 90mm gun was different from anything they had used. The sight picture was different. The ammunition was heavier. They practiced until loading and firing became muscle memory. We knew Cologne was coming, Smoyer recalled decades later. We knew there would be Panthers. We wanted to be ready. On the night of March 5th, Task Force X staged in the suburbs of Cologne. Smoyer cleaned his gun sight for the 5th time. Early checked the radio frequencies. Davis organized the ammunition racks, armor-piercing rounds to the left, high explosive to the right. At 6 a.m. on March 6th, the advance began. By noon, Task Force X had pushed through the outer districts against light resistance. By 2 p.m., they had reached the inner city. By 14:10, 3 men were dead in a burning Sherman, and Smoyer was hunting the Panther that killed them. The Sherman's destruction happened in seconds. At 14:05, a Sherman from the task force advanced down the Marzellenstrasse toward the cathedral. The crew thought the area was clear. German resistance had faded. The war everyone knew was almost over. The Panther was waiting, hidden in the rubble of a bombed-out building, its barrel barely visible among the debris. The Panther's gunner had a perfect shot. The Sherman was broadside, barely 200 yards away, completely unaware. The 75mm KWK-42 fired once. The round struck the Sherman's hull at the ammunition storage. The tank exploded instantly, a fireball visible from blocks away. The commander, the gunner, and the loader died before they knew they were under attack. The driver and bow gunner escaped, badly burned. 50 yards behind, Smoyer watched the Sherman brew up. He knew the crew. He had shared coffee with the commander that morning. Sergeant Early made the decision immediately. Smoyer, we're going after that son of a bitch. There was no tactical necessity. Other routes existed. Other units could have been called, but Early had watched too many friends die in burning Shermans. He had a Pershing now. He was going to use it. Driver, advance. Slow and steady. Smoyer, you spot him first, you kill him first. The Pershing rolled forward into the intersection, hunting the Panther that had just committed murder. At 14:08, while Smoyer's Pershing moved toward the cathedral, Signal Corps cameraman Technical Sergeant Jim Bates was setting up his 35mm IMO camera on the second floor of a ruined building overlooking the intersection. Bates was not supposed to be this far forward. His assignment was to document the liberation of Cologne, civilians emerging from cellars, soldiers raising flags, the usual victory footage. Instead, he had followed the sound of the Sherman's explosion. Through his viewfinder, he could see the burning Sherman, smoke rising black against the gray sky. He could see the Pershing advancing slowly, its turret traversing left and right, and beyond, partially hidden by rubble, he could see something the tankers below could not. The barrel of the Panther, adjusting to track the American tank. Bates began filming. He did not stop for the next 3 minutes. At 14:10, the Panther's commander, whose name has never been conclusively identified, made a decision. Rather than remain hidden and wait for a better shot, he ordered his driver to move the tank into the open square before the cathedral. Perhaps he wanted a cleaner angle, perhaps his position was about to be flanked, perhaps he simply believed a Panther could defeat any American tank in a fair fight. It was a fatal mistake. At 14:12, Smoyer's Pershing turned onto the cathedral square. The Panther was moving from left to right, approximately 150 yards away, fully exposed. "Identified," Smoyer shouted. "Panther 10 o'clock. "Fire," Early commanded. Smoyer had already pressed the trigger. The 90mm round crossed the distance in a fraction of a second. It struck the Panther's gun mantlet, the curved armor protecting the base of the barrel, and penetrated into the turret. The Panther lurched to a stop, but the tank was not dead. The turret began to traverse toward the Pershing. Davis had already loaded the second round. Smoyer fired again. This round struck the lower hull below the turret ring. Smoke began pouring from the hatches. A third round. This one hit the turret directly. The Panther's gun stopped moving. Inside the German tank, fire spread to the ammunition storage. Seconds later, the turret blew off in a massive explosion that sent debris 50 feet into the air. Total elapsed time from first shot to destruction, approximately 8 seconds. At 14:14, Bates stopped filming. He had captured the entire engagement, from the Pershing's arrival to the Panther's destruction. 3 rounds, 8 seconds, the most complete combat footage of a tank duel ever recorded. On the cathedral square, Smoyer sat back in his seat, his hands still shaking. The Panther was burning fiercely, flames licking at the stone walls of buildings that had survived 1,000 years. "Good shooting," Early said quietly. Nothing more needed to be said. Above them, the twin spires of Cologne Cathedral rose untouched against the smoke-filled sky. The Panther crew did not survive. As the fire subsided, American infantry approached the wreck. They found 4 bodies inside, burned beyond recognition. A 5th crewman had attempted to escape through the driver's hatch and died halfway out, his legs still inside the tank. No identification was recovered. No personal effects survived the fire. To this day, the names of the Panther's crew remain unknown. They were simply 5 German soldiers who died in a burning tank in the last weeks of a lost war. But the battle for Cologne was not yet over. At 14:45, barely 30 minutes after destroying the Panther, Smoyer's Pershing received reports of another German tank near the Hohenzollern Bridge. Task Force X advanced toward the Rhine. The second engagement was less dramatic but equally lethal. A German tank destroyer, a Jagdpanzer IV, attempted to ambush the American column from a side street. Smoyer spotted the vehicle before it could fire. 2 rounds destroyed it. By 1600, the cathedral square was secured. American soldiers raised a flag from a ruined building overlooking the Rhine. Photographers captured the moment, GIs silhouetted against the shattered skyline, the cathedral spires rising behind them. The following day, March 7, 1945, American forces captured the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen, the first Allied crossing of the Rhine. The war in Europe had 6 weeks remaining. Smoyer and his crew continued fighting through April. They engaged German armor 6 more times. They never lost a duel. The Pershing had delivered on its promise, 1 shot, 1 kill. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered. Corporal Clarence Smoyer was 22 years old. He had survived 3 tanks, 9 months of combat, and more dead friends than he could count. The film that Jim Bates shot in Cologne was processed, catalogued, and archived. For decades, it was shown in military training programs, documentaries, and history courses. The duel at the cathedral became the defining image of American tank warfare. Proof that when given proper equipment, American tankers could defeat the best Germany had. Clarence Smoyer did not see the footage of his duel until 1990. For 45 years, he had lived with the memory of that afternoon. The burning Sherman, the Panther emerging from the rubble, the 3 rounds that ended 5 lives. He remembered every detail, but he had never seen it from the outside. When a historian showed him Bates' film, Smoyer watched in silence. The Pershing, his Pershing, how rolled into frame. The Panther appeared. The muzzle flashed 3 times. The German tank exploded. "I didn't realize how fast it was," Smoyer said quietly. "In my memory, it lasted forever. 1 shot. 3 shots technically. But the principle held. The Pershing had done what the Sherman could not. It had killed a Panther from the front in a fair fight, on film. But the film also showed something else, the burning Sherman, the men who died before the duel began. Victory had a price. It always did." Clarence Smoyer returned to Pennsylvania after the war. He worked in a trucking company, married, raised a family. He rarely spoke about Cologne. In 2013, author Adam Makos tracked down Smoyer for a book about the 3rd Armored Division. The resulting work, Spearhead, brought Smoyer's story to a new generation, but the book also uncovered a tragedy that Smoyer had not known. During the battle for Cologne, another American tank had accidentally killed a German civilian, a woman named Katharina Esser, photographed by a Signal Corps cameraman moments before her death. For 70 years, her family had wondered who was responsible. In 2019, Marcos arranged a meeting between Smoyer and Esser's family in Cologne. Smoyer, then 96 years old, was not responsible for Katharina's death. Another tank had fired the fatal shot, but he came to apologize anyway. "I'm sorry for what happened to your loved one," Smoyer told the family. "I'm sorry for all of it." Clarence Smoyer died on February 15, 2024, at the age of 100. History remembers the duel at Cologne Cathedral as a vindication of American armor, and it was. The Pershing proved that American engineers could build a tank to match the best Germany produced. But the duel was also a reminder of what might have been. The Pershing could have been ready in 1944. It could have saved hundreds of lives in Normandy, in the Bulge, in the Hürtgen forest. Instead, it arrived in February 1945, just in time to kill 1 Panther in a city already lost. The tankers had the skill. What they lacked for too long was the equipment to match it. Today, the Cologne Cathedral stands restored, the bomb damage long repaired. The intersection where Smoyer killed the Panther is an ordinary street corner. No marker commemorates the duel. The only memorial is the film itself, 3 minutes of footage that captured the end of the tank war in Europe. But the lesson of Cologne endures. 1 shot. Clarence Smoyer proved it in a ruined square beneath the cathedral spires. The tankers who died in burning Shermans knew the cost of arriving too late with too little. Some victories come not from courage alone, but from giving soldiers the tools they need. Some debts can only be paid in blood. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. Leave a comment below telling us where you are watching from. Our community spans from Pennsylvania to the Rhine, from veterans to history enthusiasts. You are part of something special here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive